Hi, Caroline Kearney here at Powell Arts, and I'm standing with the awesome Brian Hallas, and he is going to be in our Marvelous and Unusual show, which runs now through July 16th. Brian, can you introduce us to your piece?
Yes, sure. This is a piece called Infrastructure, and it was taken, it's a photograph. It was taken about 6 or 7 years ago, so it's sort of early in my phase in my career, as it were. It's sort of the beginning of what I was doing with what I'm doing now.
With the layering and the adjustment of the layers.
And then, yeah, exactly, using different filters and things like that to change colors and change, accentuate textures and stuff like that.
It's really, I'm a huge fan of your work. What I think is really interesting is that what you are doing is specifically in this, is you're taking a picture of one thing. Right. I believe you told me it was a shelf.
Yes.
And then it looks completely different. Like you're adding color and nuance, and the filters transcend and make it into something else. When you're going in with the filters on, like previously we had shown some flowers, and we had shown some clouds, and they do look altered, but once you identify it, you're like, right. I see where you got that. Yes, whereas this is creating something completely different than what you started with.
Exactly.
How did you go in with the intention to make it almost a landscape, or did you go in just to kind of bring out textures? How did you start with this?
I started with the initial picture and then taking the apps and the filters and finding the surprise.
At what point did you think, this looks infrastructure, this looks like nature and infrastructure meeting?
It was sort of two different things. First thing was I came upon this through manipulating things, and then I went, oh, well, that's cool. And then subsequently saw it in order to name it.
Oh, that's funny.
So it wasn't, nothing was foregone.
Yeah.
Nothing was predetermined.
It's interesting because all of your works have, we talked about this before, a really cinematic quality. You're working with dynamism. They're very dynamic. But they still retain an element of like the flowers. You still look at it and you go, oh, that's a flower.
Right.
Whereas these, you're like, even the ones like we showed Blonde Ambition and different ones that were highly manipulated and looked almost like stained glass, they still retain the element of the flower. Right. Whereas with this, it's almost like you took the what you photographed and you made it into an imaginary thing that exists only in your mind. Which I think
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I think it really is a surprise. And in those, back in the early days, as it were, I was just experimenting and just seeing what may pop out.
What I think is so also interesting about this is that you tend to have, like, the colors tend to be bold, a lot of black background with bright colors popping out. What's interesting to me is this one works in planes, and you have the two reds that are mirroring each other, and then this giant white and these hard blacks all coming together. Did you think of this as, when you were doing whatever filter this was, were you trying to go monochromatic with pops, or you?
No, it really still nothing predetermined. Nothing. I wasn't going after anything per se.
Gotcha.
I was going after the surprise. I hate to repeat myself so much.
I like, but you know what? It's very Bob Ross like. The happy accidents are what make
exactly.
it.
It was like, and it's all done on my iPhone.
Yeah.
And so it was, I fool around with the apps and layers and different filters. Sometimes a filter on top of a filter on top of a filter, and each one brings out something different.
Yeah.
And some of them tend to work on texture, and then you put something else that works on color, and then you put something else that works on shape, and then it's like, oh wow.
What's funny about this one too is that it has like very, like, it actually has a line quality to it, which usually you have planes, like the edges of the planes meet, but it doesn't necessarily have like the rigid lines of it.
Yes.
Which at the top, I actually think that part of this composition that's really strong is that you have, this almost looks like it's laying on top of this.
Right, yes.
So you're giving, it's almost like you're looking through this part into this part, which I find fascinating.
And I think what the original was, as you say, a shelf, and it was a decomposing shelf.
Yeah, so everything has a different rate.
Right, so it was something that was in itself had layers. So some of it had peeled away already, which probably was in this, and this was in a layer above. And this was probably a layer below or something.
I like how you're using the different, the like natural tendencies. We've talked about this before in the work. You use the natural tendencies of these organic objects to your advantage, which I think, besides the color, which is beautiful, I think is one of the most interesting parts about your piece is the way that you are taking these organic things and then enhancing them.
Oh, thank you.
So,
well, one of the things, I have so many friends who are artists, and there are so many photographers now too that are taking pictures of things so realistically.
Yeah.
And I realized that I would either just be doing something that everybody else is doing, or couldn't achieve the things that my artist friends were doing, in a sense.
You're too humble.
Not very often, but the abstract element of it was something I felt like I could pursue.
Which is so interesting because we don't usually think of photographs as abstract.
Exactly.
But you can make a beautiful abstract work out of stuff like that. So
hopefully this is proof of that.
There's a nice amount of like ephemeral. You are good about making an ephemeral piece that like speaks of a moment but transcends that moment.
Oh, great.
I think
Thank
nice.
you. That's what nice of you to say.
So we hope that.
Yes.
We hope that you will come see Brian's work from now through July 16th during our The Marvelous and Unusual show. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you so much, too.